Once he got out of confinement, the first thing Stephen did was find Brian to submit a project application. "Have you thought this through? You agreed to go?" Brian asked, surprised. "Yes, Brian, I've thought about it," Stephen replied calmly. Earlier, Brian had talked to him about a highly classified military research project, hoping Stephen would join. Brian said Stephen was an exceptionally talented hands-on research person and shouldn't waste his gifts. He suggested Stephen discuss it with Olivia and consider joining. Stephen had been hesitant. But 3 days ago, Olivia, his wife, personally locked him in a confinement room just because he questioned her relationship with another man. That made his decision. Brian looked up at him. "What does Olivia say? Is she okay with you going?" Stephen replied calmly, "I've decided to divorce her." 3 years ago, he gave up a promotion to be with Olivia, moving from frontline to desk work. His boss tried to convince him, his parents advised him, and his colleagues warned him, but he didn't listen. He gave up his career just to be with Olivia. Unfortunately, Olivia ended up betraying his love. He had suppressed his dreams for love for 3 years, but now he wouldn't give up his dreams for anyone. Brian hesitated, then asked, "Is it about Olivia and Thomas?" The Olivia and Thomas affair was the talk of the town, and he had heard about it. "Yes. If her heart's not with me, there's no point holding on," Stephen said, feigning nonchalance. "I'll find a way to get her to sign the divorce papers. If she won't, she's at fault for infidelity, and I'll need your help to push through with the divorce," he added. "Okay," Brian nodded slightly. "There are 13 days until departure. Use this time to tidy up your affairs and sort things out at home." "Got it." Leaving Brian's office, Stephen felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. The sky had darkened and it started raining. He stood under an eave to avoid the rain, planning to head home once it stopped. Looking up, he saw in the distance a woman with 2 men. It was Olivia, Thomas, and his son Eric. Olivia was holding Eric in one arm and an umbrella in the other, while Thomas walked gloomily beside her. Their voices carried over with the wind. "Olivia, move the umbrella closer. Your shoulder's getting wet," Thomas said worriedly. "I'm fine, just don't get wet." "A cold wouldn't be good," Olivia replied. Her typically stern voice softened with unusual tenderness. Stephen had never heard her speak so gently to him. Together, her tone was either calm or cold, and he thought she didn't know how to be tender. But she did, just not with him. His heart ached at the realization. "Olivia, today's the day Stephen gets out of confinement. You're not picking him up? Is that okay?" Thomas asked again. "It's fine. He needs to cool off after his mistake," Olivia replied, her voice hardening with annoyance. "But what if Stephen causes trouble?" Thomas was worried. "He wouldn't dare," Olivia said coldly. "Let's not talk about upsetting things. Hurry back. It's cold out. Don't let the kid catch a cold." "Okay, we'll do as you say, Olivia." As they continued to talk, they moved further away. Stephen stood under the eave, feeling a chill deeper than the rain. He thought he and Olivia were in love but realized he was just a nuisance to her. Thomas was the real love buried in Olivia's heart, and Stephen was only a choice made out of a sense of duty to marry. Thankfully, he was leaving soon. Stephen forced a smile, one darker than tears. He braved the rain back home and, while boiling water for a bath, heard a noise at the door. A slender figure cast a shadow over him, followed by a crisp voice. "How long have you been back? Have you eaten?" Olivia asked. In the past, Stephen found her cool, detached voice pleasing, filled with an air of prestige. But after hearing her soft tones with Thomas, her usual voice seemed fake and annoying. He swallowed his feelings, replying lightly, "A while. Not yet. Why didn't you make something to eat?" "Not hungry." Olivia was surprised. "After days in there, I stank." "A shower's better," Stephen replied calmly. "Stephen," Olivia said, her voice firm. She walked up to him, pulling him to his feet, forcing him to look at her. "Are you mad at me? Upset I locked you up?" Olivia asked, frowning seriously. "Shouldn't I be? Only soldiers who've made big mistakes are confined." "What did I do that was so wrong, Olivia?" I questioned my wife about her relationship with another man. Is that a crime? Stephen asked, his expression calm but distant. Seeing the indifference in his eyes, Olivia felt an inexplicable panic. From the time they married, Stephen's gaze was always filled with love and admiration. He never hid his affection. This was the first time since their marriage he looked at her with such coldness. She didn't like it at all. Olivia tightened her grip on his hand instinctively, speaking coldly, "Do you really think you're blameless? Thomas lost his wife, and now he's raising his kid all alone. Life's already tough for him. If you add to his troubles with a bad reputation, how's he supposed to get by? His wife was our comrade too. So what's wrong with me looking out for him a bit? Stephen, you didn't used to be so petty and concerned about little things." Stephen almost laughed. So, confronting your wife makes you petty? He didn't argue with Olivia. He just calmly said, "Let's get a divorce." Olivia was in disbelief and snapped, "Stop being ridiculous." Stephen looked at her and firmly said, "Olivia, I want a divorce. Once we're divorced, you can help Thomas and his son as much as you want. I won't interfere at all." "And you say you're not being ridiculous. I've already told you, there's nothing between me and Thomas. I'm just helping out a fellow comrade. Why do you keep bringing this up?" Olivia said angrily. Stephen nearly laughed from anger at Olivia's retort. He opened his mouth to say something, but there was a knock at the door. "Olivia, are you home? Eric's got a fever, and he's delirious. I'm scared. Can you come help me?" Thomas's voice was full of helplessness, almost breaking just from the sound of it. Hearing this, Olivia got anxious and quickly said, "Something's wrong with Eric. I need to go. Stop being ridiculous, and I don't want to hear about divorce again." Then, she hurried out the door. "How did he suddenly get a fever?" "He was fine when we left," Olivia asked anxiously. "I don't know. Maybe it's the sudden weather change. It started last night and hasn't gone down since." Thomas replied. "Olivia, Eric won't be in any danger, will he?" "No, don't worry. Let's go check on him," Olivia reassured. Stephen stood there, watching them disappear into the rain through the open door. Sensing someone watching, Thomas glanced back at him, with a look full of disdain and challenge like a winner over a loser. Even though Stephen knew Olivia's nature, it hurt when she so openly left him behind. He felt a pang in his heart. He shut the door, tidied up, and went to bed. The next morning, Olivia was nowhere to be seen. When he asked, he found out she was on a mission and wouldn't be back for 5 days. Since she wasn't around, there was no point discussing the divorce. Stephen started packing. Some things he wanted to keep were sent back home. He gave the unimportant stuff to his neighbors. "Stephen, these things look pretty new and good. Why are you getting rid of them?" Frank from next door asked, surprised. "Just didn't need them anymore, so I'm clearing them out. If you don't mind them being used and see anything useful, keep it. If not, pass them on," Stephen said with a light smile. "Thanks, Stephen. These are great. I'll definitely take them," Frank replied hastily. "All right, take care, Frank. I'll head back now." Frank hesitated, then whispered, "Stephen, don't mind me saying this, but a man should keep an eye on his wife. You've probably heard the rumors about Olivia and that guy Thomas, right? They're not without basis. I even saw Olivia supporting him once. He said he hurt his foot. But in public, Olivia is a married woman. She shouldn't be helping him like that. You know? Olivia's young and already a captain. She's got a bright future ahead. You can't let some sly woman take her away." Stephen felt a bit dazed hearing this. He remembered twisting his ankle once and needing Olivia's help to the infirmary. Olivia refused, saying people would gossip and it'd harm her image. She wouldn't help no matter what. Finally, he managed to make it to the infirmary by himself, in pain, taking a long time. She even complained about how slow he was, holding her up and not caring about him. He always thought she was strict and didn't have sympathy, but he realized she could care when she wanted to. Turns out, she showed her feelings clearly all along. He was just blind to it. Stephen laughed bitterly to himself, but outwardly nodded and smiled. Thanks for telling me, Frank. After saying goodbye, Stephen went back home. Most of his things were packed. The room felt empty. He looked at the calendar on the wall. Stephen walked over, marking the day he'd leave, and crossed off today. In 7 days, he'd be free from this place. That night, Olivia returned. She found Stephen eating when she walked in. I'm back, Olivia said, greeting as she came in. Having dinner? Yeah, Stephen replied without looking up. Olivia washed her hands and sat at the table. Stephen, get me some food. She said it like it was expected of him, as if it were his duty. Stephen remained unfazed and said, I didn't make dinner for you. You can cook some noodles in the kitchen. Why didn't you make me dinner? Stephen, are you still mad? Didn't I explain it to you? Why are you being so unreasonable? Olivia frowned and scolded. You didn't tell me you were coming back today. Why would I make dinner? I don't want to waste food. This isn't the army where we can feed leftovers to dogs. Olivia felt like he was insulting her. But he picked up his plate and bowl and went to wash them. Olivia chased after Stephen into the kitchen. Stephen, it was my mistake earlier. I'm sorry. Don't take it to heart. She continued, since you didn't cook for me, could you make me some noodles? I'm starving. I'm tired. Make them yourself. Stephen placed down the washed dishes and left the kitchen. Olivia frowned and grabbed his hand. Why are you acting like this, Stephen? Are you still mad at me? What am I doing? Just telling you to make your own noodles. Is that a crime or something? Stephen asked coldly. Olivia bit her lip. That's not what I meant. She just felt his coldness and distance were so unlike him. It made her uneasy, like she couldn't grasp onto him. Let go. I'm tired. I need rest, Stephen said softly. Looking at his indifferent face, Olivia's heart ached, like it was pricked by pins. Why was he so cold to her? Was he really thinking about divorce? Was he really done with her? That couldn't be true. He had given up his career, broken up with his family to be with her, and during their marriage, he had cared for her endlessly, with his whole heart focused on her. He loved her so much. How could he just leave? He must be upset because she was too nice to Thomas, jealous even, trying to make her apologize. Thinking this way made Olivia feel more confident. Stephen, I know you're upset because I was kind of Thomas. I told you, nothing happened between us. I just felt sorry for him being alone with a child and tried to help a bit. If it bothers you, I'll stop talking to him. Please don't be mad. Okay? Olivia said, shaking his hand in a pleading manner. In the past, if she softened like this, Stephen would have been thrilled, eager to do anything for her. But now he only felt disgusted and mocked. Stephen looked intently at Olivia, her nervousness and attempts to comfort, finding them laughable. Her excuses were always absurd. Military life is high risk, especially for those on the front lines. Thomas wasn't the only military spouse suffering the loss of a partner. Why was she only good to Thomas? In the end, it was just an excuse. Go make your noodles. I'm going to my room. Stephen removed her hand and said calmly. Olivia felt pierced by his indifference. But since he wasn't making a scene, she thought Stephen was just venting, not truly ignoring her. This made her feel more at ease. She cooked the noodles herself and sat at the table to eat. Stephen leaned against the doorway, watching her. Olivia noticed and smiled. Still hungry? Want me to share some with you? Because of Stephen's change, Olivia felt uneasy and tried to be pleasing. No thanks, I'm full, Stephen declined, then added, join me somewhere tomorrow. Even though he decided to divorce, he wanted to end their 3-year marriage on a good note. After all, he had wholeheartedly loved Olivia for 3 years. Where to? Olivia asked. You'll know tomorrow. We leave at 9 in the morning. Okay. Promise me that, no matter what, you'll come with me tomorrow, Stephen said again. Sure. Unless the army calls, I'll go with you no matter what, Olivia replied softly, sensing that the Stephen who adored her was back. Even if Thomas shows up, you'll ignore him and come with me? Stephen asked with a playful smile. Not likely to happen. Don't start an argument, Stephen. Olivia frowned, clearly displeased. As long as you agree. Stephen didn't want to hear her excuses, so he turned to leave the room. Shortly after Stephen lay down, Olivia came to bed. She reached for Stephen, but he caught her wrist. Stephen, it's been a while since we've been together, Olivia whispered, catching his sensitive spot and making him shiver. The next moment, Stephen sat up, coldly saying, "Don't touch me. I don't want to." "What's your deal, Stephen? We're married. This is normal." Olivia was frustrated at the rejection. Even in the dark, Stephen could see the fiery anger in her eyes. Not wanting to argue, he said calmly, "I'm tired and just don't want to. Let's sleep." He couldn't have any contact with Olivia now. Whenever he did, the thought of her with Thomas surfaced. Thinking of how they might be secretly intimate disgusted him. Seeing him turn his back, wrapping the blanket close, Olivia's anger grew, mirroring his posture. The couple lay back to back, such intimate partners yet feeling like worlds apart. The next morning, Stephen got up and made breakfast as if nothing happened. Olivia returned from her morning workout, drenched in sweat. "Go shower and then eat. I made your favorite sauerkraut buns," Stephen said to Olivia with a gentle smile. It was the day to put a final note on their marriage, and he wanted it to be smooth and complete. Last night she faced his coldness. Today she was met with his warmth, leaving Olivia in a slight daze. But she quickly responded, "Okay." She didn't like Stephen's cold stare. Now, seeing him here like this was the Stephen she knew. Olivia finished her shower, drying her hair, and asked, "Where do you want to go today? Can you finally tell me now?" Just as Stephen was about to speak, Thomas burst in from outside. "Olivia, something's wrong. Eric's got a fever and passed out. He's really burning up. Can you come check on him?" Thomas choked out. "What? How did this happen? Wasn't he fine yesterday?" Olivia asked, growing anxious. Hearing this, Stephen's eyes dimmed. So before Olivia came home yesterday, she stopped by Thomas's place to see him and his son. This woman, she's got the nerve to be living a double life. I don't know, maybe he caught a chill and didn't cover up last night. I'm afraid this fever might make him lose his mind, Thomas continued. Hearing this, Olivia threw down her towel and said, "Let's go. I'll come with you to check on him." "Olivia, what did you promise me last night?" Stephen calmly interrupted Olivia as she was about to leave. She turned back to look at him. Stephen sat there, watching her quietly. The room was dim, but Olivia could see the coldness in his eyes. She felt tense, remembering she promised Stephen that unless it was an emergency, she'd always be with him, no matter what. He had asked, what if Thomas came to her? She had dismissed it, saying it was impossible, and accused him of being unreasonable. Stephen's cold, mocking gaze cut deep, leaving Olivia embarrassed. How could this happen right when she promised it wouldn't? Seeing her hesitate, Thomas pleaded, clinging to her arm. "Olivia, I know I shouldn't be bothering you, but I'm scared Eric's fever will cause lasting damage. Please come check on him." "Stephen, I know it's my fault, but this time it's really an emergency. I promise I'll never bother you again after this. Stephen, a life matters. I have to check on Eric. Wait for me. Once I know he's okay, I'll come right back to you." Olivia, driven anxious by Thomas, afraid something terrible might happen to Eric, muttered this and hurriedly left with Thomas. Watching them leave, Stephen felt a familiar sting in his chest. He numbly picked up a bun, eating slowly. No big deal. It's not the first time Olivia's left him behind. He's used to it by now. Olivia, the thorn in his heart. One day he'd remove her completely so she could no longer hurt him. After breakfast, Stephen waited for Olivia at home until 9. When she didn't return on time, he stopped waiting and left on his own. He wouldn't change his plans for someone who wasn't worth it. If Olivia didn't want to travel with him, he'd go alone. He could say goodbye to this marriage by himself. Stephen strolled through the park with a candy apple in hand, when he was suddenly bumped into. Regaining balance, he caught the child who'd run into him. He was surprised when he saw who it was. "Eric, what are you doing here? None of your business, you bad man trying to steal my mom," Eric taunted, pulling a face before running away. Stephen frowned, watching him run off, instinctively following. Didn't Thomas say the kid was feverish and out cold? Why was he here playing in the park instead? Following Eric, Stephen found himself in the children's playground. It was a bustling paradise for kids, with parents scattered around, watching them. He spotted Olivia and Thomas, talking behind a tree. Stephen scoffed, heart filled with a rising anger. So, the kid was supposedly burning with fever, when in fact he was being played like a fool. He approached them quickly, hearing their conversation as he neared. "Olivia, I'm sorry for causing more trouble today. I didn't expect Eric to wake up and insist on coming to the park. You didn't get to go back to Stephen. Is he upset?" Thomas asked. "It's fine, he won't be mad," Olivia replied distractedly, glancing at her watch. She wondered what Stephen might be doing, and if he was angry at her. The old Stephen wouldn't hold a grudge. She was sure she'd be able to cheer him up, but she wasn't so sure about the Stephen of today. Just then, Stephen felt like a fool. The urge to confront Olivia vanished. He turned and walked away quickly. She wasn't worth any more of his time or emotions. With Thomas leading her in the opposite direction, Olivia drifted further from Stephen. That night, Olivia came home to find Stephen waiting. A document lay on the table before him. "Stephen, I'm sorry for today. Olivia began to explain. "No need to apologize. Sit down. There's something I need to discuss with you," Stephen said. "What is it?" she asked reflexively. Stephen began, only to have Olivia cut him off. "We're not getting a divorce. I won't agree to leave you, Stephen. Stop bringing it up." Her voice was firm, recalling the last time Stephen spoke to her about a divorce because of Thomas and Eric. Today, she ditched their plans to hang out for something else, and he's definitely pissed. Olivia thought he might bring up divorce again, which really annoyed her. Stephen couldn't quite understand why Olivia was so persistent about not divorcing. I mean, she obviously likes Thomas. What does he have that's making her stay? "Why? Don't you like Thomas? If we divorce, I'll step aside so you two can be together. Isn't that better?" Stephen asked, confused. To him, being with someone you like and breaking up if you don't is the simplest way to handle relationships. He couldn't wrap his head around Olivia's behavior, being close to Thomas while refusing to end her marriage. "Who said I like Thomas? I don't like him," Olivia snapped coldly, but before she could finish, there was a knock at the door. Then came Thomas's voice. "Olivia, Eric just had a little accident. He twisted his ankle and banged his head. There's blood everywhere. Can you help me take him to the nurse's office?" Thomas sounded both shocked and worried. The moment Olivia heard this, her cold demeanor changed to concern, and she rushed to open the door for Thomas. Stephen stood there, his eyes darkening, feeling an ache in his chest. He hadn't yet fully taken Olivia out of his heart, so watching her with Thomas still hurt. As soon as the door opened, Thomas hugged Olivia tightly. "I'm so scared for Eric," he said, caught off guard by the hug. Olivia instinctively looked back at Stephen, who was watching her coldly. Feeling cornered, she realized Thomas still had his arms around her. Panic hit as she pushed Thomas away. "Don't worry, Thomas. I'll check Eric out with you," Olivia said softly. "Sure thing," Stephen said nonchalantly, "but sign these papers for me first. I need them by tomorrow." "Stephen, are you seriously pushing me to sign papers now? You think a signature is more important than Eric's safety?" Olivia snapped, wanting to smack the documents out of Stephen's hands. She didn't even know what they were about. She was just upset at Stephen's coldness. Stephen, quick on his feet, pulled the papers back. "It'll just take a few seconds. Sign them and you're good to go. Or would you rather stay here with me?" With an almost mocking smile, he added, "Believe it or not, if I didn't want you to leave, you wouldn't." He'd been out of the action for 3 years but never stopped training. It wasn't just talk, he could keep Olivia there if he wanted. "Stephen, Olivia was furious. Thomas gently urged, "Olivia, Just sign for Stephen. Maybe it's something urgent. It won't take long. Don't worry. Olivia looked at the understanding Thomas, then at Stephen, who was glaring at her. See how considerate Thomas is. He's nothing like you, she said loudly. Unfazed, Stephen handed the papers and a pen forward. Sign. Fuming, Olivia scribbled her name down and glared at him. Happy now? All good. You can go, Stephen said calmly, reaching for the pen. Stephen, I'm so disappointed in you. She threw the pen to the floor, grabbed Thomas, and stormed off. Stephen glanced at the pen, now broken in two, feeling a pang in his heart. Olivia had given him that pen as a token of their relationship. He'd taken care of it for years. It was precious to him, but now, to Olivia, it was nothing. He stared at it for a while, but eventually left it there, shutting the door to head back to bed. The next day, when Stephen got up, Olivia was nowhere to be seen. He didn't let it bother him and took the divorce papers she signed to Brian. Brian processed them right away, stamping them without a hitch. When Stephen got the divorce certificate, he felt a bit unreal. The past 3 years felt like a dream he'd woven for himself, sweet at first, then bitter. Now that he'd woken up, it was time to move on. Brian, could you give Olivia her copy after I'm gone? Stephen asked. Sure. By the way, your mom called me, checking in on you. I told her about the plan. You should see them before you go. They cared about you back then, Brian sighed, recalling how Stephen had cut ties with his family to be with Olivia. Stephen had truly stayed away over those years. His father had to rely on Brian to get news about him, which was sad. I will. I'll go today, Stephen said quietly, his voice almost breaking. After leaving Brian's office, Stephen went home, packed his things, and bought a ticket at the station to head back. His town was just an hour and a half away. He hadn't visited in all these years, simply because Olivia disliked it. This short trip home had taken him 3 years to start. Today, nothing would stop him from going back. He headed home with a firm heart, but standing at his doorstep, he suddenly felt nervous. He hesitated to knock. What's this? Running away again. A stern and cold voice startled Stephen. He quickly turned around and saw his mother, whom he hadn't seen for 3 years. She was there, looking at him with a cold expression. Mom, Stephen whispered softly. Alice let out a hum, stepped past him, and opened the door. She didn't ask him in, but she didn't close the door either. An invitation to enter if he chose. Stephen braced himself and followed her inside. You're back, perfect timing. Stephen's father was saying as he saw Stephen, dropping the spatula he was holding. Oh, Stephen? His father mumbled in disbelief. Dad. Seeing him, Stephen couldn't hold back his emotions any longer. He dropped his bags and rushed to hug him. Stephen, my Stephen, you're finally back. Wah! His dad hugged him, bursting into tears. You heartless kid. Said you wouldn't come back and you didn't. I thought I wouldn't see you again before I passed on. He cried, patting Stephen's back. Listening to his dad's complaints filled Stephen with guilt. Like a big hole was left in his heart, making it feel cold inside. For the past 3 years, he had been chasing a so-called love, neglecting the family who loved him. But now he realized his mistake and decided to return. Alice, watching her son and husband sob, teared up too. After hesitating for a moment, she wrapped her 2 most important men in her life in a hug. All right, enough crying. With this noise, the neighbors might come knocking soon. Feeling her touch, Stephen froze a little, then started crying harder. He thought his mom would never forgive him, but they were just waiting for him to turn back. He realized too late how stupid he had been. After the family cried it out, they gathered, red-eyed, to eat dinner. Stephen, how long are you staying this time? Didn't Olivia come back with you? His dad asked over dinner. At Olivia's mention, his dad's expression shifted. He didn't like the woman who took away his son and made him cut ties with the family. But his son loved her. For 3 years, Stephen left his family for her, and though he didn't like it, he accepted it. He didn't want his son to leave again because of her. Just for a few days, then I have to leave for a mission. Dad, I divorced her. Let's not bring her up anymore, Stephen said casually. His father was shocked, about to ask more, but Alice interrupted, slamming the table. Good riddance. She wasn't worth it. His dad gave her a look, irritated. Don't make things worse. Then he turned back to Stephen. You really divorced her? Are you sure? Marriage and divorce aren't games, you know. You left us for her, and after only 3 years you want a divorce? Will you regret this? Stephen nodded slightly. Yes, I'm sure. Brian approved my divorce papers, and I have the certificate. Dad, I was foolish for these past 3 years and hurt you. I won't make that mistake again. No woman is more important than my family. Dad, Mom, I promise I won't leave you for someone not worth it, Stephen said, eyes red. Seeing him upset, his dad reached over, gently patting his back. Okay, whatever you decide, as long as you're happy, I support you, his dad said without hesitation. Stephen focused on his meal, replying quietly. He regretted giving up on the ones who loved him for a woman like Olivia. Luckily, realizing it wasn't too late, now he won't disappoint his family. After dinner, Alice called Stephen to the study for a chat. You really decided to join that project? Alice asked. Yes, Mom. Sorry for leaving again so soon. He felt guilty for not staying longer. Joining an important mission for the country makes me proud. That's my son, not someone obsessed with a woman. That's worse, Alice replied dismissively. Stephen knew it was true. For 3 years, he was like a love-obsessed fool. You really divorced Olivia? Nothing can change that? She asked. Yes, finalized today. Here's the certificate. Stephen handed her the document. Alice took it, seriously inspecting it. You don't mind, do you? I mean, me getting a divorce, Stephen joked. These days, divorce is rare and seen as shameful, especially for the women involved. Divorce was often criticized, and reconciliation promoted. Please, I wish you'd woken up sooner. That girl was trouble with bad intentions. I never liked her. I wouldn't have given her a second glance if you hadn't insisted on marrying her, Alice said with clear disdain. Stephen heard it and seemed deep in thought. His mom, a straightforward and kind person, isn't someone who's stubborn or overbearing. He had never seen her express such obvious dislike for someone. He sensed this wasn't just about him and Olivia, there was more to it. Mom, why do you dislike Olivia so much? Is there something I'm missing here? Stephen couldn't figure it out, so he just asked directly. Yeah, there is. You're divorced anyway, so I might as well tell you. You only know you gave up a promotion 3 years ago. What you don't know is Olivia was your competitor. The military was choosing one of you to groom and your chances were better. That girl somehow got wind of it. She couldn't compete with you on ability, so she used charm and you fell for it. You got played just like that. Worse, she can't have kids, but to save face, she told people you needed treatment. We wanted to call her out, but you defended her, saying we were slandering her. This stuff was confidential, so I couldn't say anything. No matter how I tried to persuade you, you wouldn't listen, and I had to watch you get tricked by her. It still makes me angry just thinking about it. Alice vented. Seeing Stephen's face grow darker, she got worried. Son, are you okay? You all right? Alice asked cautiously, a bit remorseful. She realized telling Stephen this was like saying his marriage to Olivia was just calculated manipulation. Mom, I'm fine. I'm really okay. I've never felt better, actually. Stephen forced a smile. He thought his relationship with Olivia was just a natural progression. But now he realized it was all part of her plan. This was even more nauseating than her rekindling things with an old flame and abandoning their marriage, because it meant their relationship was a sham from the start. His love and dedication for 3 years before and after the wedding were just a big joke. Understanding Olivia's true colors, Stephen felt no attachments or affection for her anymore. The thought of her only made him sick. Stephen stayed home for a week, spending quality time with his parents. During this time, he didn't think of Olivia at all. On the last day, his mom drove him back to the base, where he joined Brian's team before heading to the mission site. Alice felt a mix of reluctance and solemnity. This task was dangerous, but completing it would be hugely beneficial. Stephen, since you've chosen this path, do it with everything you've got, even if it risks your life. I will, Mom. You and Dad take care. I'll keep myself safe and make you proud when I come back. Stephen replied earnestly. Okay, I trust you. Your dad and I are waiting for you at home. Alice waved him off with a smile. Stephen got in the car, watching through the curtain as Olivia's figure flitted by outside. He wasn't sure if he really saw her, not bothering to look back. Olivia was history. He was ready to move on and embrace his own life anew. Olivia saw Stephen's car, but not him, although she did spot Alice. Seeing Alice at the military zone was unexpected. Always intimidated by her mother-in-law, Olivia hid when she saw Alice's car, not daring to approach. She watched Alice get in and the car depart, then stepped out, puzzled. Chief, Olivia's behind us, Driver Xiao Wang mentioned, spotting Olivia in the rearview mirror. Alice glanced back. Ignore her, she said coolly. That girl schemed to steal Stephen from us. No surprise she avoids me. Of course she's guilty. Alice had never approved of Olivia with Stephen, and now divorced, she was even less inclined to engage. That night, Olivia returned home after work, but Stephen was nowhere to be seen. The place was empty, like an unused house. A wave of unease hit Olivia. Stephen, Stephen, she called out, rushing into the bedroom looking for him. But he wasn't there, not even their wedding picture on the wall. Panic rose within her. Last time, she stood Stephen up because Eric fell ill, pulling her away. That night, they argued over his divorce demand, with Thomas also in the mix. She hadn't been back in a week, wanting Stephen to cool off and show him she wasn't desperate. But she hadn't thought 1 week away would leave the house feeling abandoned, without a hint of home left. She hurried to the closet and her face went pale. Only her clothes remained, nothing of Stephen's. It's like he vanished, leaving no trace behind. Her mind buzzed as she stood there, clueless about what to do next. After a moment, she remembered something, took big steps out of her house, and knocked next door. Bahuang, are you home? Olivia called out. Someone inside heard the commotion and opened the door. Olivia, what's going on? You look terrible. Frank opened the door, looking surprised. Frank, is your wife home? I need to talk to her, Olivia asked, clenching her fist. Yeah, she's inside. Let me take you in. As soon as Frank spoke, Olivia brushed past him and quickly headed inside. Frank followed her with a frown and heard Olivia questioning his wife. Sis, have you seen my husband, Stephen, in the past few days? I haven't. Stephen is your husband, why are you asking me? Bahuang's wife said coldly. But you live next door to us. You would have noticed if he was coming and going. I've been out the past few days and when I got home today, I found Stephen's things were gone. I'm worried something's happened to him. If you've seen him, please tell me. Olivia seemed desperate to find out where Stephen was. Seeing her like this, Bahuang's wife lost her disdain and got angry. Now you're worried because he's gone. Where were you earlier? His things are gone, he must have taken them himself. And you're worried about something happening to him? What could possibly happen to Stephen? Stop jinxing it. Olivia immediately asked, do you know something? Did Stephen tell you anything? She grew more assertive, intimidating Bahuang's wife a bit. Frank stepped between them and said, Olivia, let's talk this over calmly. Bahuang's wife, now more composed, peeked out from behind Frank and retorted, Stephen didn't say a word to me, I'm just guessing. He gave me a bunch of things, saying they were useless and that I could take them if I didn't mind. They were household items, well kept, practically brand new. Why wouldn't he need them? He must be broken-hearted over you and Thomas, so he decided to leave, taking his stuff with him. Her words hit Olivia like a punch. Her face changed instantly. She had noticed before that things were missing around the house. She remembered asking Stephen about it. Why are so many things gone? Where'd they go? He had replied, I just packed them away since we weren't using them. Leaving them out was making the place messy. She had thought his reasoning made sense and didn't ask anymore. It turned out he had already decided back then to leave her. In that moment, Olivia felt like her heart was being twisted. Her face grew even more pale. Knowing she wouldn't get any more useful information, she turned to leave. From behind, she heard Bahwang's wife muttering, didn't appreciate what she had. Flirting with that Thomas so shamelessly, now acting all heartbroken since he's gone. Disgusting, ugh. Enough, enough. Mind your own business. Frank tried to calm her down. Olivia, feeling disoriented, thought, so that's how others see her and Thomas? No wonder Stephen misunderstood her relationship with Thomas. No wonder Stephen made a fuss. So it was really her mistake all along. But she hadn't meant to do anything wrong. She only thought she was helping Thomas since his wife had just passed. Who knew her help would end up costing her own family? If she had known, she never would have done it. But now it was too late to say anything. Olivia returned home to a house without Stephen and felt an intense ache in her heart. She skipped dinner, she had no appetite. After a quick tidy up, she lay down, clutching Stephen's pillow, her heart in pieces. She never thought there'd come a day Stephen might leave her. She always thought they'd be together forever. In the next moment, she opened her eyes with determination. Stephen left because he misunderstood her relationship with Thomas. Once she finds him and explains, he'll surely forgive her. Come back home. Come back to her side. Thinking this, her heart eased a little. With the hope of getting Stephen back, her numbing heart found some comfort. She hugged Stephen's pillow, tossing and turning, barely catching some sleep when there was another knock at the door. Olivia snapped her eyes open. Olivia, Eric's fever's come back, and he's crying for you. Could you come with me to check on him? She heard Thomas's voice, sounding anxious. In the past, Olivia would have already rushed out. But this time, she sat up sharply, looked around the empty room in the dark, and felt her worry dissolve. Helping Thomas had driven Stephen away. Could she really keep doing this? Olivia hesitated. By the moonlight streaming through the window, she checked the time on her watch. 9 in the evening, time for bed. Almost every time, Thomas came to her at this hour, always with the same reason. Eric wasn't well. Either he had a cold, a fever, hurt his foot, or had fallen and hit his head. Eric never seemed well, he was always sick or hurt. Thomas was still outside calling for her, anxiously pleading. Olivia felt anxious too, just about to throw off her covers and go, when she heard Bawang's wife's angry shout from next door. Did someone die in your house? Enough with the wailing, it's annoying. Olivia stopped what she was doing, hearing Thomas say with a quiver in his voice, I'm sorry, sis-in-law, Eric's got a fever. I'm really worried. If the kid's got a fever, just go see a doctor. Olivia isn't one, so why bother her? It's sad you lost your wife, but you can't just cling to Olivia, split up a couple's marriage and steal Stephen's wife, can you? Thomas quickly objected. I didn't mean it like that, sis-in-law. I'm just better friends with Olivia, so I thought of asking her for help. Oh, shut up already. Olivia might not see through your tricks, but I sure can. You're playing the victim to charm Olivia into being your wife, right? What a shameless guy. Stephen's a good guy for not calling you out, but I'm not having it. They're not home, so stop shouting. And if you keep showing your face here, I'll kick you out with a broom, Aunt Bahwang said, slamming the door in his face. Thomas muttered under his breath, nosy old lady. Sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. Wasn't she back? How can she not be home? Thomas mumbled and reluctantly left. Olivia stood behind the door, chills running through her. So he knew she was home and came specifically to drag her out? Olivia quickly dressed and silently followed Thomas back to his place. It was a run-down, isolated place with no neighbors nearby. The closest house was over 500 meters away, so whenever Thomas called, she would rush over to help. She feared him being alone with the kid in such an isolated place. But now she was starting to put 2 and 2 together. Even with the closest neighbor 500 meters away, they were still nearer than where she lived. The details she'd overlooked were now glaringly obvious. Olivia crept in from a corner, hiding in the shadows. "Dad, where's Auntie? Didn't she come?" Eric asked. "No, she's not home. Now stop pretending. Drink some hot water and go to bed. Don't really catch a cold and make it worse." Thomas said impatiently, "Okay, Dad." Eric slowly crawled into bed, wrapping himself with the covers. "Don't get too close, you're like an ice block. Stay on your side." Thomas complained. "Okay, Dad." Eric obediently moved further away. The already narrow blanket left her back exposed by her shifting. She lay flat, carefully tucking the edge of the blanket under herself before closing her eyes to sleep. Olivia watched from the shadows, feeling chilled to the bone. No wonder Eric was always sick. She thought Eric was just a sickly child, never realizing this was a trick they both played on her. She was a total fool, losing Stephen, who adored her. Because of these two, how stupid was she? Olivia felt her eyes well up with tears. In a daze, Olivia made her way back home. The empty house filled her with a wave of regret so vast it drowned her. "Stephen, I'm such a fool. Letting them deceive me, disappointing you, ruining our marriage. It's my fault, all of it. I deserve everything I get," she muttered to herself, slapping her cheeks, tears spilling from her eyes. "Stephen, I'm so sorry. I'll explain everything to you. I have nothing with Thomas. You'll forgive me, right? You have to forgive me, right?" Worried and restless, Olivia spent a sleepless night. The next morning, she wanted to go see Stephen right away. But before she could leave, she was called to Brian's office by the guard. "Brian, is there a task for me?" she asked upon entering. "No, there's something for you," Brian said, pulling something from his drawer and handing it to Olivia, her mind elsewhere, thinking how to apologize to Stephen and win him back. Olivia froze when she saw the divorce papers. Her and Stephen's names on the document cut through her like a knife. "Brian, I didn't file for divorce. How could I divorce Stephen? This must be fake, right?" she asked in disbelief. "Stephen personally filed the divorce papers. Your signatures are on it. Everything's legal and proper. It's real," Brian said matter-of-factly. Olivia remembered the document Stephen insisted she sign. Thomas had said Eric's fever wouldn't break, worrying her to distraction. She signed it in a rush when Stephen blocked her path, not even glancing at it. So she unknowingly signed the divorce papers he prepared? "Brian, it doesn't count. I don't agree to the divorce. He tricked me into signing it. I didn't even know," she pleaded. "This is between you two, not my business. As long as the divorce is legal, it's valid." "Olivia, you're a leader, don't say foolish things," Brian said sternly. "Brian, you know where Stephen is, don't you? Please, tell me. Let me go after him, win him back," Olivia pleaded. Brian glanced at her. He valued this capable young subordinate, but he sighed and said, "Stephen got involved in some top-secret operation, and honestly, I have no idea where he is now. It's clear that your divorce with him is inevitable. Face the facts and move on. I have a meeting. I'm giving you a day off, take some time to calm down and take care of yourself," Brian said as he stood up, gave her shoulder a pat, and left. Olivia hung her head low, fists clenched tight. When she looked up, her eyes were red, filled with stubborn determination. "Stephen, I won't give up. I will find you." Stephen, on the other hand, had no clue how regretful Olivia was. He was pulled into the mountains for intense training, exhausted to the point where even lifting a finger felt impossible. Days were spent giving his all during training and squeezing in sleep whenever he could. He barely had time to think about Olivia. With each training session, a few among them couldn't keep up and got eliminated. But Stephen got sharper and more fit, thanks to the grueling exercises. Finally, he and 5 others made the cut for a mission team. Stephen was the captain. They were sent to another base to meet the mission's top-secret member, someone they had to protect at all costs. Stephen was surprised to see it was someone he knew. Nancy, his mentor and guide. She had once led him as a rookie, teaching him countless skills. Colleagues joked that they were like the unbeatable duo together they conquered all. apart they shone independently. She was quiet, reserved, never smiling, colder even than Olivia. If Olivia were a block of ice, Nancy would be an ever-frozen iceberg, hard to approach. Back when he fell for Olivia and insisted on leaving to marry her, he'd cut ties with Nancy. 3 years had passed and she looked just the same as she did back then, unchanged. After locking eyes for a while, Stephen smiled and said, "Long time no see, mentor." The usually distant woman seemed unexpectedly affected, striding over and pulling him into a hug. The hug caught Stephen off guard, leaving him momentarily stunned. Before he could pull away, he heard her whisper in his ear, "Stephen, welcome home." That single line brought tears to his eyes. Nancy was an expert in weapons research and he was her sharpest operative. Every time new foreign weapons emerged, he'd infiltrate enemy lines as part of a special ops team to get a hold of them for her to analyze. However he could, whether by stealing or confronting, he'd ensure he completed the mission. If all else failed, he'd rely on his combat experiences, risking his life to memorize crucial weapon data, bringing it back for her to reconstruct and study. During her research phase, he'd be her subject, always collaborating to accurately replicate the battlefield conditions. Thanks to their seamless teamwork, they were known as the unbeatable duo. Their research facility used to be his home. Leaving for Olivia had cost him 3 years, but now he was back on his original path. That welcome home hit him right in the feels. He held Nancy tight, scared to say a word, afraid she'd hear the quiver in his voice. He didn't want to sound weak. "Why are you crying? Did something happen over these 3 years?" Despite his tears soaking her clothes, Nancy noticed and pushed him slightly back, eyes narrowed with concern. Ever since knowing he liked Olivia, Nancy's heart had felt barren. For the 3 years he was with Olivia, she buried herself in experiments, numbing the sting with work, not daring to ask about him. Seeing him again, she couldn't resist hugging him. In a crowded place, an embrace of friendship seemed appropriate, unlikely to affect him. But she hadn't anticipated his tears. Stephen's throat was too tight for words. "Hey, go get everyone settled. I need to have a chat with Stephen," Nancy instructed before leading Stephen to her office. She had him sit down, then poured him a glass of water. She remained silent, just sitting quietly beside him. Stephen wasn't the type to wallow for long. The same way he decisively ended his 3-year relationship with Olivia, he soon stopped crying on his own. His eyes red, he glanced over at Nancy, offering a sheepish smile. "Sorry, mentor. We reunite after so long and instead of catching up, you had to endure my tearful spectacle." Nancy, face still stern, said, "Why are you on this mission? Did that jerk upset you?" Her words asked, though her heart already knew the answer. It had to be that otherwise, knowing him, he'd never be reduced to tears. "Yeah, something's happened that woke me up, but volunteering for this mission was my decision, not driven by the issues over there." "Are you stupid? Can't even speak up when you're upset? I'm not dead yet, you know?" Nancy scolded him with a cold expression. Though she distanced herself deliberately to avoid following his life, had he reached out for help, she'd have stepped in for him. Her avoidance was also fear, afraid dark emotions might make her do something he'd resent her for. She hadn't realized her absence had left him feeling so wronged. If she knew, she definitely wouldn't let him suffer. The senior sister is indeed the senior sister. As soon as she spoke, she hit him hard with her words, making him quickly recall the feelings and state of being around her before. He looked resigned and said, "Senior sister, don't say that. Who starts a conversation talking about their own death? And besides, it wasn't all bad these past 3 years. For over 2 years, we were doing great. It was really sweet. Our relationship only started changing in the last few months. So you let yourself suffer for a few months? And you still don't think you're foolish?" Nancy frowned deeply. Hearing that he was doing well and was happy, her heart felt like it was being stabbed, but she was also relieved. As long as he's happy, it doesn't matter what happens to her. But when she heard he suffered for months, she nearly exploded. "Yeah, it was kinda dumb, so I stopped the losses in time. Stephen knew Nancy's harsh tone came from her concern for him, not because she actually looked down on him, so he didn't mind. He said, "I've divorced her." "What? You got divorced?" Nancy stood up, rarely out of sorts, with fists clenched, looking utterly shocked. Not sure if it was an illusion, but Stephen felt like Nancy's eyes got brighter. "He got divorced? Could it be that it's some great happy news, or what?" "Yes, I didn't want to waste energy on someone unworthy, so I divorced her," Stephen said casually. "So, senior sister, I might need your guidance again in the future." Stephen smiled lightly. "All right, got it. You can go for now. I'll have someone take you to your dorm." "I have things to do. I'll come find you after I'm done," Nancy said. "Okay." Stephen thought she actually had things to do and agreed immediately. Once Stephen left, Nancy closed the door to her office. Usually staying calm even if the sky fell, she now paced the office like a headless chicken. If someone were in the office, they could hear her murmuring to herself. "Divorced? Good. Divorced means there's hope for me. With Stephen's personality, he surely won't think about romance for now. I can't be too forward, or I might scare him. But I can't be too aloof either, or I'll wait, and then he might run off with someone else. What on earth should I do?" Nancy's head ached. Stephen, of course, had no idea about Nancy's current dilemma. He followed the person Nancy sent and went to the dorm. The dorm was extremely tidy, with nothing but a bed, a table, and a chair, not a single extra item. Stephen made the bed, fixed the blanket, pulled out some clothes to change into from his luggage, took a shower, and then lay down to sleep. A couple of days later, he set off on a mission with his team, protecting Nancy along the way. He really didn't want Nancy to come on the mission with them, but he couldn't out stubborn Nancy. Nancy was his superior, the top commander, so he couldn't disobey her orders. "Don't be mad. It's not like I want to cause trouble. The new weapon is unique. I have to be there to gather complete data," Nancy explained, seeing the frown on his face. "My team and I will do everything to keep you safe," Stephen said. Nancy must not come to harm. That was Stephen's and his team's mission with utmost priority. Even if it meant risking their lives, they had to protect her. "Don't stress so much. Don't forget who taught you all those skills at the start," Nancy reminded. Stephen was taken aback for a moment before he realized it. Nancy wasn't just some researcher holed up in a lab unable to fend for herself. Her combat skills were strong too. She used to personally go into battle herself. But her talents in research were so exceptional that those in charge were afraid of anything happening to her, and hence formed a data reconnaissance team just for her. And as luck would have it, he fit well as a team member to help gather data for her research without her going into battle directly. That's why she stayed behind the scenes. In other words, her combat abilities were pretty high too. While Stephen felt a slight relief, he still felt burdened. He said, "Regardless, you're not allowed to get hurt." "Don't worry, I won't get hurt," Nancy reassured, ruffling his hair. Stephen scowled right at her. "I mean it, no scowling at your young age. You'd look like a little old man," Nancy said nonchalantly. Stephen and his team were well-trained elites, highly sensitive to and familiar with weapon parameters with Nancy, who was an expert, yet the mission still encountered unexpected situations. Stephen and Nancy got separated from the rest of the team. The two weaved through the forest, trying to shake off their pursuers behind them. The pursuers didn't give up, and multiple gunfights broke out as they chased and fled. Their ammo ran low quickly. They exchanged a look, understanding the message without words. If ammo was out, they would have to resort to hand-to-hand combat. Like specters, the two found positions to hide. With perfect teamwork, they finally eliminated the pursuers one by one. Stephen took down the last foe. Blood splattered his face as he drew out the combat knife. He didn't care and wiped it with his hand, looking up to smile at Nancy. "Finally, done with them." "Great job, Stephen," Nancy praised. But then her tall figure seemed to lose all strength, collapsing suddenly. Stephen was startled, hurrying to catch Nancy. "Senior sister, are you okay?" Stephen asked in a panic. He kept his voice low, knowing there might still be stragglers. But holding Nancy, he already knew what was wrong. His hand on her back came away covered in blood. Stephen's eyes widened, recalling the earlier scene. They had a few bullets left before, during peak pursuit from the enemy. He had just dodged a bullet and taken out a foe when Nancy hugged him. He heard a gunfire at the same time as he heard her muffled grunt. He quickly asked senior sister, "Did you get shot?" "No, I just accidentally stepped on a rock," Nancy said. "Let me take a look," Stephen insisted, worried. "No need. I'm fine. We gotta go, or they'll catch up with us," Nancy replied. In the urgency of the moment, he believed her and let her pull him along. Looking back, he now thinks she took a bullet for him back then. She denied it, but he totally bought it. He couldn't be more oblivious. His mission was to protect her. Yet not only did he fail, she risked her life for him. He felt wretched. Stephen was full of regret. But regretting now wouldn't help. Stephen quickly carried Nancy on his back, seeking a safe cave to lie low. He found one, carrying Nancy inside. Once Nancy was settled, and certain there was no danger in the cave, Stephen left to gather some wild berries and water. With Nancy injured and unconscious, they would have to wait for help or for her to wake up before planning their escape. Stephen started a fire in the cave and checked Nancy's wound. The bullet was still lodged in her body. So he heated his knife to disinfect it, found some hemostatic powder and bandages in his bag. Then he carefully extracted the bullet, applied the powder, and bandaged her wound. Even though Stephen was especially cautious, Nancy still developed a fever at night. He heard her talking in her sleep. "Stephen, don't like her, she's not worth it," Nancy mumbled. Stephen could only muster a bitter laugh. Seems like everyone around him knew Olivia wasn't worth it, except him, stupidly thinking she was the best and gave up everything for her. "Stephen, I'm right beside you. Why would you rather like her than glance at me?" Nancy murmured again. Stephen was shocked by her words. Is that what she meant? As she continued to mumble, Stephen started piecing things together. He was stunned. Never in a million years did he think Nancy liked him. He couldn't believe it, feeling both rueful and surprised. That night, Stephen stayed awake until Nancy's fever broke, and only then did he slowly fall asleep. The next day, Nancy woke up. She looked pale and tired, giving Stephen a weak smile. "Guess I'm getting old and useless, causing you trouble," she murmured. Stephen shook his head. "Don't say that, Senior. If it weren't for you taking that bullet, you wouldn't be hurt. It's all my fault." "Silly, don't say that," Nancy replied with gentle eyes, looking helpless. Stephen recalled her fevered murmurs from the night before and his gaze faltered. He couldn't meet her eyes and said, "Rest here in the cave while I find some food and scout the area. Maybe I'll find the others." "Okay. Be careful and don't go too far," Nancy agreed. Stephen confirmed with a nod and departed. Knowing his senior liked him for years, but too shy to say it, haunted by regret at how they'd missed each other, left Stephen feeling complicated. He wasn't sure how to face Nancy now. Nancy watched him disappear from sight, her gaze thoughtful. The little guy seemed scared, too afraid to face her. Lucky she confessed her feelings during the fever, laying some groundwork. If she told him up front, he might never want to see her again. While Stephen was scouting, he found the rescue team searching for them. He led them back to the cave to retrieve Nancy, and they returned to the base together. Though everyone got hurt, the mission was complete. Once back, Nancy took 2 days off before diving into documenting battlefield data and organizing a research team. "Stephen, go persuade Nancy. She's still hurt but buried in research work already," someone suggested. Stephen frowned. "Really? Just a few days in? Her wound hasn't healed, and she's overworking. This is ridiculous." Stephen followed a guard to find Nancy. "Senior, you've documented the data, let others research. Come back and rest properly," he urged. "I'm fine, Stephen. Can handle." Seeing Stephen's increasingly stern face, her voice softened, her usual unemotional face showing a rare guilt. With a sigh, she conceded, "Okay, I'll go back and rest." Stephen almost smiled at her demeanor. He kept his stern face, escorting Nancy back to her quarters. He didn't expect to run into Olivia at the dorm entrance. It had been over a year since he last saw her. She looked thinner, and her spirit wasn't what it used to be. Seeing Stephen, Olivia brightened and walked toward him, calling out, "Stephen." Hearing the name Stephen, he recalled Olivia and Thomas's conversation, feeling a flash of disgust. "Don't call me Stephen. It makes me sick," he said coldly. His icy tone froze Olivia in her tracks. She looked at him, lips moving, unsure what to say. "Haven't you divorced Stephen already? Why are you looking for him again?" Nancy asked coolly. "Our matters aren't your concern," Olivia replied, wary. Stephen might be clueless, but she knew well enough that his senior liked him. In the past, she wouldn't consider it a problem. Stephen's heart belonged to her, after all. But now, she couldn't help being cautious. After all, she still hadn't calmed Stephen down or made him change his mind. Nancy was annoyed and wanted to say something, but Stephen stopped her. "Sister, you go back to your room and rest. I'll talk with her." Stephen said, "You're still going to talk to her? You two are divorced, what's there to talk about?" Nancy was fuming. Her emotions were rarely out of control. Eyes red and brow furrowed. Her whole aura screamed displeasure. It was the first time Stephen had seen her like this, and oddly enough, he found it interesting. He softly said, "We still need some closure." Nancy wasn't happy, but she couldn't really stop him. She gave a sarcastic hum, "Whatever. It's not like I have the right to intervene," and marched off, slamming the door behind her. Clearly, she was throwing a tantrum. Stephen had never seen this childish side of Nancy before and found it amusing. Olivia noticed the little smile on Stephen's lips and was startled. She glanced at the closed door, feeling uneasy. "Stephen, we need to talk," Olivia said as she stepped forward instinctively, reaching out to grab Stephen's hand. Stephen quickly stepped back, avoiding her touch. Olivia's hand came up empty and her eyes darkened. The sense of losing him was so strong. It made her face go pale, and her heart ache even more. "Just say what you have to say. No need for any touching," Stephen scolded, his eyes cold and severe. Olivia looked at him sorrowfully, whispering, "Stephen, you've changed. You weren't like this before." I told you, don't call me Stephen. It makes me sick," Stephen interrupted, his expression full of disgust and rejection. Olivia could see the disgust and was confused. Why? Had he grown to the point where he couldn't even stand her saying his name? If he was that disgusted, how was she going to win back his heart? Why? Really, Olivia? Don't you think that's a bit funny? Stephen sneered coldly. "I'm a person, not a stand-in. You couldn't get Thomas, so after he got married, you decided to use me as a substitute? I figured it out, so stop pretending. It makes me sick." Stephen's words hit hard, leaving Olivia stunned. Her face went ghostly pale as she tried to explain. "Stephen, it wasn't like that. I never used you as some stand-in. Please let me explain. Yes, I did have feelings for him once, but after he got married, I let it go. I married you because I genuinely care for you. Helping Thomas was just because he lost his wife, and his wife used to be my best friend, so I did a little more than I should. But I have absolutely no feelings for Thomas. Stephen, believe me, I only care about you, Stephen. Don't leave me. Come back. Let's get remarried. Okay?" Olivia pleaded almost desperately. Since she became a leader, everything had gone smoothly for Olivia, and she hardly had to beg for anything like this. But now, she was setting aside all her pride and dignity just to win Stephen back. Unfortunately, Stephen didn't feel moved by her desperation. His heart, instead, was filled with nothing but nausea and calm. The almost year-long separation had been enough for him to move on from the past relationship. He had dug Olivia out of his heart. Now, he wouldn't be hurt or saddened by her. Stephen looked at her calmly. "You know me, once I've made a decision, there's no going back. I won't remarry you. We were married for 3 years, and never once did I hear you say you cared about me. Now, a year after the divorce, I hear it, and it's nothing but ironic." Olivia's face turned even paler. looking like she might fall apart. "Stephen, I know I was wrong. I swear I won't interfere with Thomas's life again. Can you not forgive me even for that? Stephen, let's get remarried. I'll spend my entire life making it up to you." Stephen couldn't get her to stop calling him by his name, so he just had to bear the irritation in silence. He shook his head seriously. "No, Olivia, we're already divorced. I'm doing really well now. Please don't disturb my life." Olivia looked at Stephen, and even if she didn't want to admit it, she had to face the fact that she might have really lost him. She had let go of the Stephen who once had eyes only for her. Olivia covered her face, her eyes stinging with unshed tears threatening to fall. "Just go, and please don't come back to bother me," Stephen said flatly, unmoved by her pain. Olivia watched him, heartbroken, and finally managed to smile weakly, whispering a single okay. "Stephen, we were married for 3 years. Could you at least have one last meal with me? A breakup meal?" Olivia gently requested. Stephen was about to refuse, but Olivia added, "If you don't agree, I'll stay here and not leave." "Olivia, are you crazy?" Stephen snapped, unable to hold back his frustration. "Just think of it as that. You know me, once I've spoken, I won't change my mind," Olivia said, her expression strained but her voice composed. Despite her paleness, she seemed to have regained composure. Stephen's face darkened, but eventually he agreed. He didn't want any more trouble because of Olivia. As they were about to leave, Nancy's door opened and she stepped out. "Stephen, I'm hungry. I want to eat," Nancy declared, her tone almost playful as she looked at him. Even though he thought she was childish and ridiculous, he didn't really want to have dinner alone with Olivia. So he nodded and said, "I'm about to grab some food. Want to come?" Olivia, with a sour face, said, "Stephen, a breakup dinner doesn't involve 3 people." Nancy chimed in casually, "I can sit at the next table." She was determined to have this meal one way or another. Olivia wanted to object. Stephen, irked, said, "Eat if you want, if not, whatever." Olivia didn't dare say anything more, just wearing a sullen face while following them outside. The 3 of them reached the door and were about to get in the car when Thomas jumped out, blocking their way. Compared to a year ago, Thomas seemed a lot older and more worn out. With red eyes, he glared at Olivia and shouted, "I knew you couldn't let go of that jerk Stephen. Stephen, you've already divorced Olivia, and yet you cling to her? Have you got no shame?" Thomas glared menacingly. "Which eye of yours saw me clinging to her? She's the one chasing after me, and this is my place." Stephen rolled his eyes, shooting back unabashedly. Thomas got stuck on that, left speechless with bulging eyes. A year ago, Thomas was a brooding, handsome guy, but now he seemed to be heading toward the bitter husband vibe. "Stephen, I have nothing to do with him. I don't even know why he's here. It wasn't me who called him," Olivia hastily explained. She had hoped to make things up with Stephen by inviting him for a meal, but with Thomas showing up, things suddenly felt off. Stephen hadn't forgiven her yet, and Thomas popping up would only make things worse. Stephen glanced at Olivia, his face void of expression. He wasn't angry at Olivia, he was just tired of it all. He had moved on from that marriage, and he wasn't interested in going back. Bad relationships only brought him pain and suffering, and he wasn't into that. Yet these 2 seemed determined to thrust themselves into his face, which he found incredibly annoying. "He's here, chasing after you, and you claim there's nothing between you. Who's gonna believe that?" Nancy snorted. "Stephen, don't fall for her sweet talk. Some people are two-faced, saying one thing up front and another behind your back." Stephen gave her a look, gently furrowing his brows. Wasn't she supposed to be the ice queen? Why was she talking so much today? If Nancy knew what he was thinking, she'd feel so wronged. Sure, she was cold and generally quiet, but in this case, if she didn't speak up, what if someone else ran off with Stephen? She wasn't about to make the mistake of handing Stephen over to someone else again. "Shut up. This is between Stephen and me. None of your business," Olivia snapped, exasperated. Stephen already wasn't pleased with her, and now, with Nancy stirring things up, he'd only dislike her more. Why should she shut up? She's not wrong, Stephen said calmly. Olivia looked completely crushed. Stephen, are you really siding with her and bullying me? So what if we are? You and that guy next to you haven't exactly been kind to Stephen. Nancy sneered. Olivia, just go. We're divorced. Don't keep clinging. Let's part with a little dignity. Stephen said flatly. Stephen, won't you give me a chance? Is there really no hope for us? Olivia asked painfully, reaching for Stephen. Before Stephen could react, Nancy pulled him back. Don't ever touch Stephen with your dirty hands. Nancy said icily. Olivia, Stephen doesn't even like you. I'm the one who truly loves you. You used to like me too, remember? What changed? Thomas pleaded, holding her hand. Caught between Nancy and Thomas, Olivia failed to reach Stephen. They were less than 2 meters apart, yet it felt like an insurmountable distance. It seemed like she had really lost him, unable to reach him anymore. Stephen frowned. Just go away, don't stand in front of me. It's bad luck. Let's go, ma'am, Stephen said, grabbing Nancy's hand and hastily walking away. Stephen, Olivia tried to follow. But Thomas held her back tightly, preventing her from chasing. Olivia, Stephen doesn't like you anymore. Chasing after him won't help. Look at me, I like you. I've been waiting for you. You did like me before, treated me well, so why have you changed? Thomas asked, choking back tears. A year ago, Thomas's delicate looks might have made this scene seem pitiable. But now, looking worn and weary, it just seemed repulsive. Olivia forcefully pulled his hands off, pushing him away. Thomas fell, landing on his backside. His hands pressed against the ground, gravel digging in, making him wince with pain. Olivia, how could you treat me like this? My hands are scraped. But Olivia felt no sympathy, just watched him coldly. Thomas, I told you, I don't like you. The person I love is Stephen. Stop pestering me, will never work, Olivia said sternly. Since the night she discovered Thomas and Eric's deceit, Olivia had consciously distanced herself from the father and son duo. But Thomas was annoyingly persistent, constantly chasing after her. Most outrageously, he had even tried stripping down and throwing himself at her once. Even after being kicked out by her, Thomas seemed shameless and wasn't giving up at all. He just turned around and started bothering her again. For a whole year, she'd been terribly annoyed by his persistence. So, when she finally found out where Stephen was, she rushed over. She didn't expect Thomas to follow her too. But you're divorced from Stephen. He doesn't love you anymore, and he doesn't want you, Thomas said angrily. Olivia's eyes darkened. I'll find a way to win him back. He used to love me so much. He left only because he thought I didn't love him. Once I tell him how I feel, he'll definitely come back to me. The more she talked, the more confident she became, like she was going to win. Seeing Olivia so determined, Thomas realized he had no chance with her and burst out laughing sarcastically. Haha, you love Stephen? That's the funniest joke I've ever heard. Olivia looked furious, but Thomas wasn't scared at all. He sneered, if you really loved Stephen, why did you keep leaving him to take care of me and Eric? I thought you two really needed help. Olivia felt a bit uneasy. Deep down, she knew she wasn't as noble as she claimed to be. She just got distracted by Thomas's vulnerable act. But she'd never admit that. Ha, tell enough lies and you'll start believing them, Thomas mocked. Stephen was still around when you threw yourself at me. Why didn't you push me away then? Her face flushed with embarrassment. Thomas, shut up. She looked around nervously, afraid someone might overhear. Olivia, do you really think you can just turn around and get Stephen back? Don't be ridiculous. You think Stephen's still that guy who was madly in love with you? He doesn't love you anymore, Thomas added. Liar, I know Stephen still cares about me. He's just mad and ignoring me. If I wait long enough, I can win him back, Olivia said with teary eyes. Thomas snorted. Stephen won't come back. He planned your divorce himself. Why do you think he insisted on you signing those papers that night and even threatened you? Because he talked to me beforehand to distract you so you'd sign without realizing it. Hearing this, Olivia's mind went blank, and she almost couldn't stand still. Stephen had teamed up with Thomas to orchestrate their divorce? Stephen held Nancy's hand as they walked towards the dorm. Nancy looked down at their hands with satisfied delight. She wiggled her fingers through his, intertwining them with his. Stephen noticed but pretended not to. When they got to the dorm door, he calmly let go. Those party poopers are here, so we can't go out to eat. I'll just cook some noodles in the room. Sound okay? Stephen asked. Okay. Nancy agreed sweetly. To him, her usual cold demeanor turned into that of a cute, obedient girl, often leaving Stephen a bit dazed by the change. Since cooking wouldn't take long, Stephen let Nancy wait inside. But Nancy insisted on standing by the door, watching him cook. Stephen, you're impressive, cooking noodles and all, Nancy praised. Stephen was speechless, giving her an amused look. Anyone who can't cook noodles is a total loser. That's true, Nancy muttered, unfazed. She quickly found another way to compliment him. Stephen, these noodles smell exceptionally good, they already smell delicious. Stephen added water and said, I just fried some eggs and added water. I haven't even put in the noodles yet. How could it smell? Nancy then pouted. You could be a little more agreeable, you know? Just once? Stephen, no can do. Nancy's face quickly turned cold. With one swift movement, she stood right in front of him. What do you want? You're divorced, and Stephen clearly said he doesn't want to see you. If you keep this up, I'll have the guards arrest you for trespassing on a military site. Nancy's voice was icy, her presence commanding. Olivia hadn't even spoken before Stephen gently patted Nancy's arm. Calm down, or you might strain your injury. Hearing this, Nancy instantly softened, becoming all compliant. Okay, I just don't want her bugging you. She frowned. I know, I'll handle it. Stephen stepped forward, looking at Olivia with a frown. Why are you here again? Haven't we already cleared everything up? Stephen asked, annoyed. The way he spoke to Nancy was completely different from how he addressed Olivia, which Olivia could definitely feel. She looked upset and asked, Did Thomas tell me you got him to help orchestrate our divorce? Yeah, that's right, Stephen admitted. He didn't deny anything because it was true. Olivia looked increasingly pale. She lashed out, pointing at Nancy. So the reason you wanted the divorce was because of her? Were you cheating on me all along? Was Thomas just an excuse? You! Smack! Before she could finish, Stephen slapped her hard across the face. Olivia felt a buzzing in her ears, and her face hurt like it was going to split open. She slowly turned to Stephen, disbelief written all over her eyes. She never thought Stephen would actually hit her. Stephen looked at her coldly. Olivia, don't think everyone is as gross as you and Thomas. You're married, yet messing around with another guy. And Thomas? He knows you're married and still plays the victim, messing with a married woman. I kept quiet because it's disgusting, and I didn't want to get into it. But if you make me lift the veil on this, the only ones who'll look bad are you two. Ever since we got married, I haven't been in touch with my old colleague. It was because of a top-secret mission that we reconnected, and now we're both working for the same organization. I've stayed faithful throughout our marriage. Whether you believe me or not, that's on you. And by the way, we're divorced now. I am single. Even if I date, marry, or have kids with someone else, it's got nothing to do with you. You have zero right or position to question me. Having said his piece, Stephen gave Olivia another look of disdain. He couldn't believe he once found something appealing in her. I've said what I needed to say. Get lost or I'll make you, he added. Stephen turned away, ignoring Olivia's expression or reactions, and started cooking noodles for himself. Why are you still here? Nancy demanded as Olivia stayed put, glaring at her. Olivia ignored her, silently watching Stephen go about his business. He finished cooking the noodles and started scooping them up. Don't worry about her. Come on in and eat, Stephen told Nancy, then walked inside, brushing past Olivia like she didn't exist. Stephen, are we really done? Olivia finally asked in a hoarse voice, almost sounding like she was about to cry. Stephen didn't pause or respond. Nancy, witnessing this, found it satisfying and snapped, just leave, you homewrecker. Stop being an eyesore. Then she followed Stephen inside, shutting the door with a loud bang. Stephen frowned at her. You trying to break the door? You'll be fixing it if you do. Nancy shot back. Fine. I'll fix it. Anything breaks in this house, I'll take care of it. Stephen glanced at her. Just eat.
I'm hungry.
Nancy nodded and focused on her noodles. They paid no attention to whether Olivia had left or not, continuing their meal and casual chat. Outside, Olivia stood there, listening to the distant murmur of conversation and laughter. Her heart ached until it went numb. She finally accepted the truth. Stephen was done with her, and there was no chance of winning him back. Feeling hollow and devastated, she turned and left. Stephen, finishing up his meal and taking his bowl to wash it, found the corridor empty. No more eyesores in sight. His dishwashing went a little faster. Nancy noted, "Looks like Stephen's really moved on from her. What did you think? That I'm still hung up on her?" Stephen responded, a slight sarcastic smile on his face. "Maybe a bit before, but not now," Nancy chuckled. Stephen rolled his eyes. In matters of the heart, her mind was a lost cause. Nancy hesitated for a while before asking, "So, Stephen, are you ready to open up to a new relationship?" At this, Stephen looked up at her with sharp, unreadable eyes. Nancy's heart skipped a beat and her breath quickened. Finally, Nancy asked tentatively, "Stephen, you wouldn't let a toxic ex make you swear off love and relationships, would you?" Please don't, she thought. She'd waited so long for him to break free from that failed marriage, hoping she could step in and become the one for him. If he shut his heart down, what was she going to do? Nancy felt the ache of impending tears but pushed on. "Stephen, she's just one bad apple. There are plenty of good women out there." Stephen, seeing her panic, couldn't help but grin. "Like who?" "Like me." Nancy's eyes sparkled. "I'm a catch, and you know it. Out of our peers, I'm definitely at the top of the pack. We know each other well, work great together. Maybe we could make a life together too, what do you think?" Stephen frowned, looking conflicted. Isn't that overboard? We work well together on the job, and if we also date, marry, and live together, wouldn't that mean we're stuck at the hip 24/7? Sure, your face is nice to look at, but I'd probably get sick of it eventually. Let's not. Nancy almost spat out a mouthful of blood when she heard that. What happened to the whole being close gives you an advantage thing? Turns out, she's being dismissed for being too close? Nancy quickly said, "How could you get tired? If we're together, whether at work or in life, you'd be able to keep an eye on me all the time. You'd know what I'm up to, and wouldn't have to worry about me running off with some other guy, right?" Stephen relaxed his eyebrows a bit, thinking she had a point. "And I'm pretty awesome. If this research ends successfully, they're planning to promote me. My rank would be way higher than that ex of yours. She'd have to look up at you. You could easily outshine her." Nancy tried hard to sell herself. Stephen nodded, "You're right." No matter what Nancy said, Stephen agreed, but he never agreed to be with her officially. Nancy talked until her mouth was dry. Seeing Stephen still being so calm, she bit her lip and decided to go for it. "The most important thing is, I love you." She grabbed his shoulders, looked at him seriously, and said softly, "Stephen, from the first time I saw you, I liked you. That like turned into love. I've loved you for so many years. You don't even know. When you came to me all happy saying you liked Olivia and wanted to marry her, it broke my heart. I couldn't stop you. I didn't want you unhappy or have you hate me. Stephen, I lost you once. From the moment you married her, I became a walking corpse until a year ago when you came back and told me you got divorced. That's when I started living again. Stephen, can you give me a chance to pursue you? I'll be good to you. I'll never hurt you like Olivia did." As Nancy spoke, her eyes got red. When she saw Stephen still looking at her without any change in expression, her heart sank. Finally, she let go of his shoulders, gave a bitter smile and said, "I'm sorry, Stephen. I lost my composure. Just forget what I said. We can go back to how things were." The next moment, Nancy froze. Because Stephen was holding her face, making her look up as he leaned over and kissed her lips. A quick peck, there and gone in an instant. She didn't even get to fully feel the warmth of his lips. "Okay, I agree," Stephen said. "What did you say?" Nancy was stunned. "Go fill out the marriage report. Once it's approved, we'll get the certificate." Stephen threw out those words, went back inside, and closed the door. Nancy stood there in shock. A moment later, she almost jumped for joy. "Don't move too much. If your wound opens, it'll delay the certificate." Stephen's voice came through the door. Nancy forced herself to tamp down her excitement and quickly responded, "Okay." Then she hurried back to her dorm and started rummaging through her things. The paper and pen for the marriage report were on the desk. She needed to find her household registration book and other documents. Stephen listened to the chaos from the room next door, leaning against the door with a silent laugh. Though his life took a wrong turn and he had a tough time, he was glad he had the courage to start over. Nancy's years of secret love, her silent watchfulness and open confessions over this year, since he knew of them, he couldn't ignore. His heart wasn't made of stone. He was willing to give them both a chance, to nurture her affection and see it flourish. He thought it couldn't possibly turn out bad. After all, Nancy respected him enough and didn't use her efforts to manipulate him. Just for that, he thought it was worth a shot. He believed there was a bright and happy future waiting for him.